ほど危険かがわかるんだよ。あの時頼ることができたのは自分のイカダだけだった。前方には嵐が、後方には追っ手がいた。逃げ出した後、何日も海を漂流した挙句、食料と飲み水が底をついてね。目の前が真っ暗になって気を失ったの。正直、もうでも終わりじゃなかった。それどころか新たな始まりを迎えられるなんてね。そう、まさに九死に一生の旅だったね。
Minesweeper, how to play. The object of the game is to uncover the map without clicking on any mines. Open a new game, then left-click randomly until you uncover some space and information to work with. If you click on a mine, you lose the game. Click on the smiley face to start a new game. A numbered square indicates how many mines are adjacent to that square, either above, below, right, left, or diagonally. Spaces not adjacent to mines are blank, showing no number. The lowest number is 1 and the highest is 8. Right-click to flag a spot you know where a mine is. Right-click on a flag to clear the mark. You will be unable to accidentally left-click a marked square. If you perform a right and left click simultaneously on a number that has the corresponding number of flags adjacent to it, it will open all the squares surrounding that number that don't have flags. You can also left-click on the number to accomplish this. Using reason and deduction, use the known information from the revealed numbers to figure out where the mines are located. Once all the mines have been properly marked and the rest of the board cleared, you win. Adjacent to that
Picasso kedali tobi dibon Adama no naka puwa pukadi Kiku shaku ho gaga Kesera sera bibi dibon Yakasake muka mazu dibon Toboge da kawu shobo topori Hezo no gise sami Tochiri kaleda hamide long Kapore people pampe popa Pipupe popi Gamba shimba itsu de moko onaru no Doki biki pakuri a itsu wa dare Donki mina fuji mina kedamono da Nanjara ka popi zakura wo Zongon hana kedo mucho mucho Nanjara ka popi zakura wo Bimbo papo pipo pape popi Kemina 비브라본 우타이 다스요 노래 시작인 지구하구대 바라 메사메 주변에 알라비롬 메소메소리로 하지케봄 갱치다 싶어 와라리라딘 우키우키봄 내로 카메할 에랭지 타지라돈 아빠 히프 하페 포파 산단 칼날라 지소 온나들로 우카장카리 감카리소 우츠와다로 시라케타 우야케타 케다모노다 은자라카 포피자 크라운 돔베 카라멜로 케초케초 덴자라카 포피자 크라운 장그레 파포피포 퍼페포피 하포피포 파페포파 피포페포피 Gamba shimba itsu ga moko naru wo Dokiri bikiri bakuri a itsu wa dare Donkiri na fuji mina keramono wa
Lying down on the floor late night and you don't know what to do. Hard to tell what's wrong, what's right, if yes or no. Don't know what to do. The storm hits hard and you're losing the way. Just take a chance and dance in the rain. 'Cause you got the key, never throw it away. Don't forget what I said. And get out of your head. Life is only what you make it. You're gonna be okay. So go ahead and do it. You want it, let's get to it. Everybody's gonna know your name. 'Cause sparks like a flame turn the dark of the night into day. Don't stop, just go your own way. So don't be afraid, trust your heart, keep your head in the game. Keep up, and never be afraid. Gotta make it hot like a volcano, like a match and burn it up. Kick your feet against the table to the beat of the wrong drum. は夜をさよせらせらありのまま考えないでこよ音楽はきっとやまないそうだ僕がずっと泣いたかったのは誰かのヒロインじゃないさ僕は4号体をセラセラありかけの輝きでこよ音楽はずっとやまないそうさ僕は愛を体をセラセラ世界宇宙の真ん中でこよ音楽はきっとやまないそうだ僕がずっと泣いたかったのはだってシンデレラじゃないさ
Tonight the moon is rose in a crimson red, but roses gotta wither, so I'll live forever instead. And now I can't get rid of all of these thorns in my head. Bring on the hemorrhaging, I guess I'll live inside your memory. Another distorted story that ignored the deceased. I'll live inside of a castle, pray I'm never released. I'd rather kick it in the dungeon cause I'm that kind of beast. I'll bet my heart on the cards because I trust me the least. Precious not even do that, precious moments when bad about it. Rest of them will scream and shout it, the best don't sleep, I was all about it. But weeping keeps tucked in shadows, this creeping feeling of identity that's closing in on every side of me. Red tomorrow, red today. Dread sorrow, can't turn away. Can't turn back. Time, I'll always be a prisoner to my ambition. Last petals fall, I'll dance your tune, but hold your breath, guess who's running the show? And when this red runs black, I'll ask you, was I everything you imagined? When my time's finally up, the sun's falling down, I'll turn stone again. Every day is fights irrelevant, and it cannot last, so relish it. Then our planet's vast, this whole ditch toss out the past, and you strike it rich. Nobody asked for the mask is not right fit, and his fiction's no disaster in spite of it. I say curious, what comes after it's mysterious, and it hold on, stay beautiful, stay young. There are blades to be swung, yet rising soon. Regard the moon, reflected in the crimson song tonight. Red tomorrow, red today. Dread sorrow, can't turn away. Can't turn back. Time, I'll always be a prisoner away.
「星が揺らいで夢を見ている」「焦がれたその音が待ってるの」「きらめくから決めてる日々に伝えるこのメロディー」窓から覗いた雨の降る街並みを弾ける音だからポケットに詰め込んでさすな君の好きなキラージョのステップに乗せて魔法のようなライトが私を照らしてる星をついて夢を描くよ焦がれたその声が呼んでるのきらめくからまたぼった君に届けるこのメロディーこのままじゃね終われないスペシャルなステージ踊り明かすのこのままじっと捨てられない走り出そうよ明日は晴れるからまだ目が覚めないカーテンも開いてない憂鬱そうだったコメントが抜けれたレクチャーないつも聞いてたショーウィンドウの服着替えて魔法のようなドレスがふわりって翻る満天の星空にほら浮かべてみて明日のビジョンにそこで見えるそこで見え 昔から続くようにそういつも傷つけ合ってまた会っちゃうのさ同じ未来を見ていたいあの夢手にしたいそれぞれ違った心で走ればどこを見ても真っ暗な場所に目がえてんだほんの小さな希望にこの瞳奪われた不安で揺れる心をうまくチューニングしてほんの小さな勇気を振り絞っていたよ諦めの文字デリートして進む苦しい時ももう私は一人じゃないからだからもっと夢追いかけたいワクワク止まらない想像を超えてく世界見せてあげるアクセスしてみたい後悔なんてそうさせないそれぞれ違った心で走れば重ねた手はぎゅっと離さずに行くよ夢見る空へ窓越しに見上げたとても小さな空ここで出会えたのは数えきれない奇跡繰り返した一歩がきらめきをつないで星のような笑顔を導いた Day by day みんなの声が力になる Stage by stage ここでそれぞれ目指すものそれぞれ描くものそれぞれ願った夢重ねた手はぎゅっと離さずに一人違う描き出すときめき振り向くことなくまっすぐに行くよ夢見る空へ生まれたてのドキドキを響かせよう最高の時間最高の仲間ときらめきに乗って覚えてるかな最初の歌私声が震えていたあの日から続く未来はみんなとつかなきょだよもっともっともっともっと加速するハート一緒に行くよどこまでも準備は OK 開け夢の扉を生まれたてのドキドキを響かせよう最高の時間最高の仲間とここにいるよ見つけてくれたから君に会いたくてやってきたんだ
待してみた幻だった。信じたかった、すがりたかった。体の奥底に開いた螺旋状の穴、僕だけじゃなく君にもなんだね。許されることなどもう望んじゃいない。抱き寄せてもまだわからないシルエット。ためらいもなく傷つけた代償か。君のそぼは揺れて僕を離れたい。どちらが欲しいかなんて残酷な問い。神様は何度僕らに投げかける。虹を抱えるたびに僕の後ろに穴が開く。伸びた一本の影、誰もが手にしうる小さなかけらで何ができる。どちらが欲しいかなんて残酷な問い。神様は何度僕らに投げかける。何盛り返せず飲み込んでた。見たくなかった、触れたくなかった。体の奥底に芽吹いたあの花の種。君だけじゃなく僕にもなんだよ。触れられない本当に願うくらいなら作り物の姿でも自信を望む。君が僕につけてくれないとしてもたった一人で見つけ出すだけだから。どちらも手に入れようと失ったもの。神様に抗おうとしても取り戻すと痛みに誓うたびに僕の背中に赤く刻まれた無数の傷。誰も選ばない選択肢をこの手に何ができる。どちらも手に入れようと失ったもの。神様に抗うとしても取り戻す。君が生きているなら僕は死んでいるだろう。僕が生きているなら君は死んでいるだろう。背を向けて僕ら全部期待してみた幻だった。信じたかった、すがりたかった。体の奥底に開いた螺旋状の穴。僕だけじゃなく君にもなんだね。どちらが欲しいかなんて残酷な問い。神様は何度僕らに投げかける。道を抱えるたびに僕の後ろに穴が開く。伸びた一本の影、誰もが手にしうる小さなかけらで何ができる。どちらが欲しいかなんて残酷な問い。神様は何度僕らに投げかける。ダークシックス不平等な性を恨み合う。密かにずれてたフリー。
For a while, I was talking to this girl named Tori, and I really liked her a lot. Things didn't really work out in the end, but while we were talking, we'd talk like every night. Over the phone usually, sometimes FaceTime. This was last July. We were in the middle of an extreme heat wave. I was playing FIFA with my friend Carl when my phone started ringing. It was Tori, almost right on time. I had come to expect a call from her every night around 9. So I told Carl that we'd play the second half later, and to keep his console on, I picked up the phone and started chatting with Tori. She lives 20 minutes away from me, and it was a work night, so when she asked me to come over, I told her I wish I could, but I'd be down tomorrow. She told me how her parents had been gone all day, and she didn't know where they were. Her parents were an interesting couple. They weren't neglectful or anything, but they were very unconcerned. Like, they'd let Tori do whatever she wanted, basically, and not really ask her where she was or what she was doing. Plus, they themselves would go out 3 nights a week to eat or hit bars or comedy clubs or whatever, and it wasn't uncommon that they'd be gone multiple nights in a row. This was one of those nights. We were just BSing over the phone, talking about how neither of us wanted to go to school or work the next day, and a bunch of other boring stuff. Then she said she was going to go cook some pasta and she'd call me when she's done. So during that time, I told Carl to hop back on FIFA and we resumed our game. By the time the game was over, I was expecting Tori to call back at any moment. She didn't though. Not for a while at least. I tried FaceTiming her after a while, and the first call didn't go through. So after 5 minutes I tried again, and she picked up. She was in her living room walking upstairs. As she picked up, she said she was confused, and I asked why. She said because the front door was open as she went down to the kitchen to make pasta, but her dad's car wasn't in the driveway, so her parents weren't back yet. She kept acting all worried and scared, joking that someone's in her house and gonna kill her. I would laugh and mess with her, saying you're probably right, and she'd playfully tell me to stop. She got back to her room and was laying in her bed, and about a minute later, she remembered she left the pasta boiling for too long and she ran downstairs to the kitchen, leaving her phone behind. Her phone was left with the screen down and the camera facing the ceiling, so all I saw on the screen was her white ceiling and the colorful moving shapes and patterns from her little light projector. Then I heard Tori yelling angrily from downstairs, probably about her overcooked pasta. But along with that, there was a noise that seemed to come from inside of her room. I kept looking at the screen, curious now. My curiosity turned to horror when I saw a man's face appear in frame. But just for a second, and only like half his face. He looked directly at the camera. I felt as though I made eye contact with him for a second. Then he disappeared again. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know her house phone number, and I couldn't scream for her to run, but with my TV in the background playing the FIFA main menu screen music, he surely knew someone was on the line with her. I was panicking, so without hanging up, I ran to get my house phone and called 911, telling them to get to Tori's address immediately because of a break-in, and that I couldn't talk long given the situation. I brought the phone to my room with me without hanging up and picked up my iPhone again. It was around the same time Tori came rushing back into her room with a bowl of pasta steaming hot. She was still talking in her calm, sweet, innocent voice, apologizing for being gone too long. I didn't know what to do. That man might have been in her room, in her closet, under her bed. I wanted to warn her, but I couldn't without the chance of her being attacked. I tried to stall until the police got there, and I had the police still on the phone, listening to my FaceTime call. I heard the 911 operator tell me to somehow get Tori to go outside. I was tasked with a seemingly impossible task without making it obvious. I knew if I tried to warn her in any way, she'd freak out and make it obvious. So I told her calmly, "Go outside, Carl's outside in his car, he has your backpack." For the record, she left her backpack at my house, and I was pretending Carl was dropping it off. This worked. She got up, albeit slightly confused as to why he was dropping it off, but she put on her slides and went outside. This was when I yelled at her to run next door to her neighbors now, and that someone was in her house. She immediately freaked out and started crying, understandably. She pounded on her neighbor's door, who thank God answered quickly. I drove over there right away after that, and by then police were there and inside the house. Unfortunately, this story didn't have a totally happy ending. That intruder made his escape before police got there, likely wise to the fact that police were coming. We locked all her doors before going to sleep at my place that night. A month later, we stopped talking, because she found a better guy, I guess. You'd think after this, we'd have started dating the next week. That didn't happen. But recently, we've been friendly again, just not the same. But aside from that, it really is so disturbing thinking that he may have been under her bed or in her closet, listening to us. I wish I screenshotted his face when I had the chance. My best friend Casey and I usually go out together on the weekends. We're kind of inseparable most of the time, but there was this one weekend that I had COVID, and so I couldn't go out with her. She went out with our other friends Connie and Rachel. They went to this outdoor beachside bar that I'd wanted to go to but never had been, so I was obviously very upset and kind of jealous. Honestly, because of this, I was a little salty and not answering Casey that eagerly, or the other two for that matter. I went about my night watching stupid movies in my bed, sneezing all over the place and generally feeling like death. Eventually I picked up my phone and realized Connie and Rachel had blown up the group chat, asking Casey where she was, and then asking me if Casey had texted me at all. I went to check my text from Casey, but she hadn't sent anything besides her last text that I ignored, so I sent a "Hey, you okay?" and it delivered. Phone was still on, that's good. The girls told me the last time they saw Casey was when she was with some guy at the bar, and that the next time they went back to where she was, they were gone. I told them to calm down, that she was probably still with the guy, though I would know more than anyone that it wouldn't be like Casey to leave with a guy without saying something, unless she was really, really drunk. I tried FaceTiming her, and someone picked up, but it wasn't Casey. It wasn't anybody, actually. It was just some dark room. Whoever picked it up was clearly hiding off camera. "Hello?" I asked. "Where's Casey?" I asked over and over until the call ended. I started spamming Casey's number, blowing up her phone asking where she is, who has her phone, etc. Then, to my surprise, I was getting a FaceTime call from her number. I picked up, and this time there was a man's whispering voice on the other end. He claimed Casey was fine, that she came home with him and now she was passed out in his bed. I asked him who he was, and he said they met at the bar. I tried to fact check this and ask what bar, and he said the right one. His story seemed to be checking out, but I asked him why he wouldn't show me his face and why he was whispering. He said it's too dark in the room and that Casey was sleeping and he didn't want to wake her up. The first part of that answer made no sense. I told him turn on the light and show me that Casey's okay. There was silence for a second, and then the call ended. I told Connie and Rachel about this, and they were equally concerned. After blowing up Casey's phone some more, the guy answered with an address and said, "We're here, come pick up your friend." The location was some small-looking house 15 minutes away. I told the girls, and by now they left to the outside of the bar so they could talk to me on the phone. They agreed something wasn't right, and that I shouldn't go to that address. I then remembered I had Casey's mom's number buried deep in my phone, so after finding that, I texted then called her, and she picked up, explaining Casey was in fact home, and had been for half an hour, crying but not explaining what happened. So I FaceTimed Casey's phone one more time, and it answered to the dark room again. I said hello a bunch of times, no response, so I threw out some bait and said I'm on my way. And then the whispering voice replied from somewhere off screen, "Good, don't knock, just come right in." Then I reeled the bait back in and said, "I know you're not with Casey. I'm calling the police on you right now." And then something I didn't expect happened, and it freaked me the hell out. In a split second, the phone was picked up off wherever it was sitting, and all I saw in frame was this ugly, creepy-looking man looking into the camera. He was smiling this insanely wide smile, and his eyes were open as wide as could be. It's as if he was trying to make as scary of a face as possible. I hung up because I couldn't look at it. So Casey was leaving the bar with the guy she was with, and they got into what she thought was an Uber, but the driver and the guy she met were acting weird, and she found out that they knew each other somehow. Suspicious it was a trap, she got out of the car the first chance she got, but she didn't have her phone on her anymore. She borrowed some random person's phone to call her mother to pick her up. Casey and her mom called the police, and I met them at the house address that was provided via text. I met them there, but didn't get close to anyone to not get them sick. Casey's phone's last location on Find My iPhone was indeed at that house address, so police knocked on the door and no one answered. There wasn't anything they could do, but they suggested to call 911 again in the morning and knock again then, and that's what they did. And the next morning, an older man answered and claimed he didn't have anyone's phone, nor did any young men live in this house, nor did he know anything about the entire story. Casey says he might have been the driver in the car, but she can't tell for sure. There was not much else that could be done. Casey's phone was off, and the last location was never updated again. Do we know for a fact Casey dodged a bullet? Yes. Do we know what that bullet was? Hell no. One night I was home alone with my brother. It was during a snowstorm in January. My parents were both away. My little brother was in his room doing whatever, while I was playing League of Legends on my computer. I get a knock on my door, and my little brother asks if I can drive him to his friend's house. I agreed to, only because I have a Pathfinder which does well in those snowy and icy conditions. Plus his friend only lives about 5 minutes away. So we left, and I was back within literally 15 minutes. I entered the house as I left it, quiet and empty. I went back to playing League on my computer. I FaceTimed my friend Jay, who was also playing. I would always do this and lean my phone on my monitor so it would be facing me and I could see the screen. This went on for a solid hour or two, before I heard a sound from downstairs, and I assumed my little brother got a ride back, or hell, I assumed it was maybe our cat. I didn't go down to check though. A few minutes later, when I least expected it, Jay suddenly said, "Mark, I think your brother's sneaking up on you." I turned around but didn't see anyone. "What are you talking about?" I said, and he said he saw him peering around for a second from behind the wall. Now, to explain the layout of my room a bit, my bedroom is a loft, and there's a dividing wall that separates the stairway from the rest of the room. That wall was where Jay was claiming to have seen my brother peeking at me. So I called my brother's name, and he didn't answer. I went over to check the stairway, and he wasn't there either. I wasn't sure if Jay was joking around or not at first, so I pressed him, and he kept saying he wasn't lying. So I left my room to check the rest of the upstairs. I checked my little brother's room first. His lights were out and his door was shut, so maybe he wasn't home. I checked my parents' room, and then the spare bedroom, also nothing. Plus, the front door to the house was still shut and locked. So at that moment, I was thinking Jay was trying to scare me, or he just was seeing things. Then I realized our cat Sunshine wasn't anywhere to be seen, and maybe she was the one who made the noise. I went down to the den and found her hiding in the corner behind one of the couches. That was odd behavior for her, and it made me more paranoid. Then I heard something. And you know when you're in a dead silent room with someone else, you can just hear their movements. Like the slightest thing even, just the sound of the cloth of their clothes rubbing on something. I heard that slightest bit of sound from behind the sectional couch in the corner of the room. I stood up and got just one step closer, and I heard a slight exhale. It was quiet, but audible enough for me to hear it. I didn't run. I walked upstairs to the kitchen, grabbed the phone, went to my room, locked the door, and called 911. Jay was still on the FaceTime. I kept him on and let him listen to my call with 911. The police arrived very quickly, and I opened the front door for them. "Where are they?" the first thing they asked at the front door, and I told them downstairs in the den. The police started shouting, making their presence known, and I didn't see it happen, but they found the intruder with his hands up behind the couch in the same spot I heard him. It was a white male in his mid-20s. He had a large blade in his pocket that God only knows what he was planning on doing with. Thank God he didn't hurt our cat while he was down there. Sunshine hiding all scared like that also may have made me stop and listen for that 5 seconds that I did. Being on FaceTime with Jay like that also probably saved my life. I think the guy saw or just heard me on FaceTime with my friend and didn't want to witness to anything. Him hiding in the den like that instead of leaving makes me think he was planning on waiting until everyone in the house was asleep. This was my fault for not locking the door when I dropped my brother off, which I used to do because we live in a cliché safe neighborhood, but no one's ever really safe. My family was all appalled, but proud of me for how I handled the situation. The intruder's name was Richard Taylor, and he was sentenced to 7 years in prison.
Gas prices are way up, so I figured this topic is more scary than ever. Enjoy today's episode featuring terrifying things that happened at gas stations. Just try and see if your bank account can survive the next pump. By the way, if you've ever seen a scary or unexplained creature while out at sea or at the beach, send me your story at darkstories.org for an upcoming Sea Monster episode. Thank you. Now, let's begin. Gas Station Creep from Optical Illusion. I started working part-time at a local gas station convenience store over the summer of 2016 to earn some extra money while attending college. When I was hired, I was informed that female employees were never scheduled to work overnight shifts for obvious safety reasons, which I was relieved to hear. I wasn't so much worried about my safety, but I was concerned about getting enough sleep before classes. It wasn't long before I found myself dreading the days I had to work, though, as the job turned out to be much more difficult than I'd anticipated. We were always short-staffed, which forced us to constantly multitask between running cash registers, preparing food, keeping eyes on pumps, cleaning, stocking, etc. To make matters worse, the two women who managed the place were awful in every way, and I frequently found myself biting my tongue and talking myself out of quitting. I was especially on edge when they cut our 15-minute break down to 10 minutes, as I never seemed to have enough time to use the restroom and smoke a cigarette fast enough. But it wasn't until several annoying encounters with a regular that I finally started to break. Let's call him James. James was younger than me, maybe late teens or early 20s, and he thought he owned the place. Perhaps being the grandson of one of the managers gave him a sense of entitlement to screw with people there. The first time I met James, he approached the counter to purchase some chewing tobacco. As I was ringing him up, I of course asked to see his ID. Then he reminded me who he was related to, but I politely asked again to see his ID. Another employee overheard our conversation and assured me he was old enough, so I went ahead and rang him up. Staring at me intently the whole time, he looked down at my name tag and said, "Mindy, that's a pretty name." I thanked him for the compliment and gave him his dip, but he continued talking to me and asking several personal questions. He wanted to know where I lived, what my last name was, whether or not I had a boyfriend. Meanwhile, a long line had formed behind him, and not trying to be rude, I said something like, "Sorry, there's a line behind you," and I casually motioned for the next customer to come up. But James didn't leave. He simply stepped to the side and continued talking to me, watching me, as I rang each customer up. It was immediately uncomfortable and unsettling for me, but I did my best to pretend like I wasn't bothered, even when his persistence escalated, and another coworker told him to leave me alone. James soon began to make more appearances after that. The second time was with his girlfriend and another male friend by his side. Yes, he had a girlfriend, and I was very confused when he began to flirt with me again, this time right in front of her. Oddly enough, she didn't say a word. So I brushed it off and played along, assuming he was just the goof that my coworkers said he was. But when he sat in a booth with his sidekicks at the back of the store, I could still feel his eyes burning a hole right through me. Over time, I grew more suspicious of James. I would witness him do and say countless things to hurt others. I knew that he was annoying, and I'd learned to brush it off as an all-in-good-fun type of humor, like everyone else did. But when I caught him making fun of another coworker to her face, all I could feel was anger towards him. I removed her from the situation by taking her place at the register, as I could tell she was very hurt and embarrassed by his comments. And by doing so, it was apparent to James that I did not approve. He would continue to cruelly harass this girl, and even some of the customers who came in, but trying to make him stop was like scolding a child. I didn't lash out at him though. I just began to ignore him. James then began to play these head games with me while I was working. He would take soda and candy, walk outside without paying for it, and then come back in the store and say that I forgot to ring it up, loud enough for everyone to hear. One night he even filled up his gas tank and took off without paying for it, before returning to say he had forgotten to pay. He knew he'd always get away with it, because Granny was the manager. By this point, it wouldn't have surprised me if he really was stealing gas and food from the store. There was something dark and strange lurking behind his goofball facade, and I avoided him like the plague, though it was nearly impossible to do at times. Then one day, while I was working alone with another coworker, we were very busy with tasks as usual, when lo and behold, James walked in by himself. I muttered under my breath, "Pain in the rear," and I walked straight back into the freezer to finish what I was working on earlier. But James followed me inside the freezer. I didn't realize he was there until he walked right up behind me, asking why I didn't greet him anymore. Startled, I jumped and quickly turned around, grabbing my chest and asking him what the heck he was doing back here. He laughed as I told him I was busy and reminded him that only employees could be in this area. He ignored everything I said. Instead, he proceeded to ask me more personal questions, just like he did the first day I met him. "You never told me where you live," he reminded me. "I'm curious about you. I just want to know. Tell me where you live." He was moving closer and closer to me, literally backing me into the corner of the freezer. "Are you afraid of me, Mindy?" he asked. I tried to push past him, telling him to move, but he kept stepping in front of me, blocking my way, blocking my escape. "Not until you answer me," he said. I started calling out for my coworker, who showed up and gave him heck for being in the freezer. Finally, then, I was able to push past James, and I made my way to the front counter, where I looked at the clock and saw that it was time for me to go home. I gathered my things and punched out as quickly as I could. But James followed me to the parking lot. Quickly, I got into my car, but James had managed to grab the top of my door before I was able to shut it. "Come on, just let me see your ID," he persisted. I repeatedly told him no, before I found myself practically begging him to let go of my door so I could go home. He grinned at me and warned me, "Don't make me follow you, Mindy." Chills ran down my spine, knowing how bold of a person he was and considering the fact that he literally just cornered me in the freezer only minutes ago. I highly expected him to follow through. Threatened by visions of what my drive home might soon look like, I became angry. I looked him dead on before shouting, "Let go of my freaking door and stay away from me." I then grabbed the door handle and ripped the door shut as hard as I could. He tried yanking on the door handle to tear the door open from the outside, but luckily I locked the doors in time. He then began to bang on my window, demanding to see my ID, but I started my car and backed away from him. I turned the wheels and hightailed it out of there. I saw him just standing there, watching me speed off down the road. I was never so glad to finally get away from him, but I was paranoid the whole way home, thinking that he could possibly catch up to me on the road, even though I never saw his vehicle behind me. I would end up quitting my job after this, and I didn't care that my hiring manager was teed off about it. I had enough of everything, and dealing with James was the last straw. I didn't bother explaining anything to my manager, because it was apparent to me that James was probably never held accountable for anything he ever did wrong in his life, and he likely never would be. I never saw him again after that, and I hope I never do either. James was a jerk, a clown, a joker, but he was also borderline psychotic. Gas Station Creeper. From Anonymous. It was the summer of 2010. I was a 16-year-old guy, and my friend Ryan had just hooked me up with a great job at a gas station. The job had all sorts of perks, like getting discounts and getting free soda from the fountain in the gas station. But the only thing that sucked was the location of the station. It was a good 30 minutes outside of the city I lived in the middle of nowhere. The road that led to my work branched off the highway I took to get there. My shift was the graveyard shift, from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. It didn't really bother me, though, because I was a night owl myself, and I usually didn't go to sleep until around 5 a.m. During that time frame, people rarely came in, and if they did, it was just to put money for gas. But for the most part, my shift was dead. I was never scared or worried about the people that came in. Until this one day. It was towards the end of my shift, and I had about a half hour left to go until I could finally go home. There were about 5 people coming in during my shift, which meant it was busier than usual. I was sitting at the cash register, scrolling through Instagram, bored out of my mind. By then, an hour had passed since the last customer had come in to buy a soda or gas. I got up to go to the bathroom, because I drank probably around 3 gallons of soda that night. My manager told me I had to lock the doors to the gas station when I went to the bathroom, since I was the only one there at the time. However, I didn't think it was a problem, so this time I decided not to lock them. No one ever really came in, so I didn't find it necessary to lock them. Once I was done and all washed up, I walked out of the bathroom and went back to the register. That's when I noticed a man had entered the store. Immediately, I felt upset with myself, because the one time I didn't lock the door, someone had to come in. He was standing on the other side of the small gas station, looking at the beer. He was swaying from side to side, like he was on a rocking ship. The man was very talkative, and was wearing all black pants and a hoodie with his hood on. His clothes were covered in dirt, as if he had just gotten done rolling around outside. His smell was the worst part, because he smelled like pee and roadkill. The smell covered the whole store. I ended up having to cover my nose with my shirt. I wasn't creeped out just yet or anything, more curious. The creepiness began, though, when he didn't move. He kept standing there, swaying back and forth for 10 minutes, looking at the same beer, facing away from me. I thought he must have been drunk or something, but I doubted that drunk people could stand there that long. After those 10 minutes, I talked to him from the cash register. "Sir?" He didn't say anything, just continued to sway looking at the beer. "Sir, are you going to buy something?" I called again, but he didn't say a word. I was very creeped out at this point, and I didn't know what to do. The next thing I did was one of the dumbest things I've ever done. I decided to try to get him to leave. I walked down the short aisle to him. I tapped him on his back, and I told him that he needed to leave. It came out as more of a whimper because I was scared out of my mind at this point. The second I told him this, he stopped swaying. Slowly, he turned around and looked down at me. The fear I felt then was like none I'd ever felt before. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move or speak. Once I saw his face, I became petrified. I just stood there, staring at him. His face was covered in dirt, and he looked like he was 100 years old. Blood spilled out of a gash that started at the top left of his forehead and went diagonally across his face. It looked as if he was struck in the face by an axe. His eyes were the worst part. They were milky white, as if he was blind. He just stared at me. I don't know if he was actually blind or only partly, but it felt as if he was looking into my soul. Then he pushed me with more force than I thought he had. I tripped and fell back onto the ground. That's when he pulled out a 10-inch knife, something he had been hiding. The tip was covered in blood. My heart pounded as he loomed over me, like a lion standing over a hurt gazelle. Then the shock wore off, and I began to think more clearly. I pushed down with my hands and was able to push myself back onto my feet. I turned as quickly as I could and ran to the bathroom, slamming the door shut and locking it. The bathroom was a small square white box with graffiti all over the place. The mirror was cracked, which was kind of ironic considering all the bad luck I was having. I reached for my phone in my pocket, but I'd forgotten I'd left it by the register. I saw the shadow of the man outside. Then I heard the tap, tap, tap of what must have been his knife on the door. "Open up," the creeper said from just outside the door. He began to bang on the door then, harder and harder by the second. At that point, I just wanted to sit in a corner and go to sleep, so I didn't have to deal with this anymore. But that's when I remembered there was a window above the toilet. It was one of those small rectangular windows. I got on the toilet and began to open the window. I pushed out the screen, and then I looked back. The man had made a large dent in the side of the door. It was enough that I could see outside of it. I cursed out loud, then squeezed myself through the window head first. I fell on my hands, suddenly feeling a sharp pain jolting up from one of them. I squealed a little. Pushing past the pain, I got up and began to run down the street. I looked back. The man was now running at top speed after me. My adrenaline kicked in. I continued to run down the road as fast as I could. After about 5 minutes, I had to stop to catch my breath. I glanced back. I noticed the psycho was not following me anymore. I continued to walk alongside the road. After walking for God knows how long, the sun began to come up. I was tempted to stick my hand out and hitchhike, but the last thing I wanted to was to interact with another stranger. I was coming up on a rest stop where I saw a police cruiser. I ran right over to it. I told the officer inside everything that had happened. He drove with me back to the gas station to get my phone and to check things out. When we got there, the man was gone. And to this day, from my understanding of it, he has never been found. I quit my job after that incident. Now my greatest fear is for that man to show up at my new night job. I never want to see him again, and I just want to forget about what happened. Close call at the gas station. From Anonymous. I lived in Augusta, Georgia for about 2 years. This experience is the sole reason I left, and I think about it almost every day. I lived with my husband and mother-in-law when his father and sisters came to visit. His parents liked to drink and were way too drunk to get more alcohol. Thus, they asked my husband and I to get more. I resent this more than anything. As you'll soon see, it would have prevented the further events if my husband did not passively agree to his parents' wishes. There was a somewhat shady gas station just up the road where we lived. I am a year older than him, so I was 21, but he was still 20. I was the one who went to purchase the alcohol. As soon as I entered, alone, I might add, I noticed 4 strange men in dark baggy clothing. And right away they noticed me. They started staring. I'm a reasonably attractive girl, so I figured they were just gawking. I ignored this and went to the back of the store, grabbing a 6-pack of beer. I then brought it to the counter. As I did this, the men were behind me. Some flags went up as I noticed they were practically scanning me with their eyes. I paid for my things and left. I didn't notice the men follow me out. As we pulled back out onto the main road, I saw a car behind us, but I didn't think much of it. We pulled in front of our house and I saw behind me the car. It had parked right behind us. 2 men ran out of the car and in front of us, blocking us getting out of our car. My husband was in the front and I was in the back. They both pointed guns at us. One was pointed at me, the other at my husband. One of the men began to speak. "Give me the pocketbook." It was one of those moments you could not believe was happening. I began to speculate if our lives would end at that moment. Just as I was in a flustered daze, I completely drowned out the man's voice and looked at my husband. He was calling 911 while a gun was in his face. I remember yelling at him, "Brian, we're both going to be dead before anyone can help us." Then the man started to count. "Give it or I'll shoot. 1, 2, 3. I didn't want to know how far he would count before he shot us, so I gave in and handed him the wallet. The two men got back in their car and peeled out. It was very foggy and dark that night. Both my husband and I are nearsighted, so we couldn't get a plate number or a good description of the men in the car. My husband carried me into the house absolutely hysterical. I broke down on the hallway stairs as his parents and sisters came to us in concern. His parents seemed to sober up as my husband explained what happened. He then called 911 afterwards. I remember looking at his parents and silently cursing them for making us go out there. As my husband was on the phone, I suddenly remembered the men in the gas station. When the police arrived, he said he could not give a good description of either the men or the car. I immediately recommended checking the gas station security cameras, as I was followed by the men previously. They made a report and gave us a card in case anything came up. Unfortunately, I never heard anything back, even after all the times I called. I never saw my wallet again, nor do I know what happened to those men. I canceled all my credit cards afterwards. We've long since moved to Tennessee, and it's been 5 years. I still wonder what became of those men, if they were ever caught, if they robbed someone else or worse. I also wonder if the guns were fake, or if we could have avoided the situation at all. My husband and I have a beautiful son who will be 2 in February, and I still think about how he never would have existed if those men had pulled the trigger. This idea is beyond haunting. Just to think because a couple of drunks needed more beer. I still resent them for that. A walk to the gas station. From Cagiest Nickel, 72. This story happened in Utah. I've lived here all my life and know the state pretty well. I had a great friend of mine spending the night one night. We'd been friends since about 4th grade, and at the time we were both in about 7th or 8th grade. I lived maybe 10 minutes of a walk away from a Common Sense, which is a gas station for those who have never heard of it. There was also a school just off the corner from my house at the time. My friend and I were getting hungry, so we looked through the house, but nothing was there that we wanted. Eventually, we decided to combine some of our allowance money to go to that gas station. We didn't end up walking by the house where the scary stuff happened on the way there. Instead, we walked by a main road to the gas station. The main road was a little behind the school, so that was our reason to walk by such a busy road. But something was off. There were barely any cars on it. It was basically a highway. I didn't think much of this at the time. We finally made it to the gas station. There was still a bit of light out, as the sun was going down behind the mountains. We decided to sit outside the gas station, snacking a little, before we began our walk home. Now here's the part when things start to feel really weird. I've always been pretty good on feeling if something was off. Just as we started walking home on a back road path, I was staring at the sky trying to figure out this feeling of anxiety. I seemed almost panicky, and I wasn't sure why. This is when me and my buddy began to notice this weird star formation shifting around, like the stars were swapping places. He and I both mentioned it at the same time. I then asked him, "Do you have a really bad feeling too? Like something's about to happen?" He said yes. There were at least 15 shooting stars in the matter of minutes, which got us feeling even more weird than before. As I knew the area better, I was leading the way back home. I decided to take a road that would lead us right to the school. When we turned onto this road, I felt sick to my stomach. It was then that I set eyes on that house. The blinds were open with a sliding glass door so we could see in clear as day. As we got closer, we saw a lady standing there, looking into a walk-in pantry. She was pale as snow, and her hair was messy, standing straight up. My friend said we should take a different road, but I didn't want to walk a longer distance as my legs were getting tired. So I said, let's just push on through. We kept walking, and at about 60 to 50 yards away, we didn't even see her move, and our eyes never dropped from that door. She was in the middle of the kitchen looking in our direction then, She was perfectly still, face unchanging. But when I got a good look, it chilled me to my core, and I froze for a moment. Her face was not human. Her jaw was more open than humanly possible. Her eyes were wide open, but no eyes were there, like it was just the sockets. And as dumb as it sounds, there were these black upside-down crosses on her face, with popping out black veins. As I rubbed my eyes to make sure that what I was seeing was real, the lights within turned off. I could no longer even see a silhouette of her. We kept on walking. 20 to 30 yards later, we see her door sliding open, with really long fingers gripping it. But I didn't see her come out. My buddy and I then start speed walking. We get near the deck, which is around 15 feet high. That's when we hear something. It was the woman screaming that she was going to kill us at the top of her lungs. Right after that, we heard the high-pitched scream of a little girl. My head shot around to see her jumping off the deck, landing face first on the ground. But then she proceeded to crawl fast right at us. We ran full speed, dropping whatever snacks we had left. As we got to the corner across the street, I turned around to see if it was still coming. What I saw was terrifying. 3 to 4 tall figures, around 9 feet tall. They were coming, along with that woman crawling at us. We ran all the way home for around 4 to 5 blocks straight. Ever since that day, I'll never go near that house again. And I hope that what we saw that night was nothing more than a shared illusion. Now to finish off this episode, I've added 3 stories from a previous episode titled Rest Stop Horror Stories, as they fit this category pretty well. Not to mention that old episode didn't get so many views anyway, and I don't want these stories to go to waste. Enjoy. The Rest Stop That Never Was, from Midnight Cowboy.
I didn't go away to college, so meeting girls and overall socializing wasn't as spoon-fed to me as the kids who went away to party schools and prestigious universities. In my freshman year, I grew bored fairly quickly as my friend group had shrunken tremendously. Meeting people at what was basically a commuter college was next to impossible unless you joined clubs or sports. So my main source of meeting girls, at least, was Tinder and Bumble or Instagram. One day I got a follow request from some very attractive girl named Miranda. I could tell she was attractive just based off her profile picture. I requested to follow her back, and when she instantly accepted my request, I started to look through her pictures a bit to make sure it wasn't a catfish. Her profile seemed real. She had around 4,500 followers. She only followed a few hundred people, and all her pictures had a lot of likes and comments. And then she DM'd me, and my face lit up. She DM'd me saying she found me on Tinder and thought I was cute, which, yes, I had my Instagram username in my Tinder bio at the time. She also had photos posted dated back to beyond a year prior, so everything checked out on my catfish radar. We chatted in the DMs for a few days. When she posted a new picture, I liked it and commented on it as she asked me to. I just put down a couple fire emojis. She liked it, of course. I checked some of the other comments, and they were also from guys gassing her up, throwing her compliments left and right. Clearly, I wasn't the only guy talking to her, or at least trying to. Well, one night we struck up a conversation once again, still in the DMs. I told her I had the house to myself that night and figured I'd be risky and invite her over. She seemed pretty open to it. I just tried my best to keep it as lighthearted as possible. I gave her my address just to ask her how long of a drive it would be. She said 10 minutes. I then confirmed if she was coming or not, and she replied, "Yeah, I'll come." Then she asked me how old I was, and I said 18. She replied that she was 19, but this conflicted with something that I remember she replied to one of the many other men commenting on one of her posts. His comment was something like, "Damn girl, how old are you?" And she replied 25. The guy she was responding to was some bald guy who looked to be in his 50s. This got me suspicious. I started analyzing the people who were commenting on her posts a little more, and I realized they were all guys. There were no female friends of hers commenting supportive stuff that you'd see on basically any other girl's Instagram. And most of the comments seemed to be just old, creepy dudes telling her how sexy she was. I then looked for any pictures of her with other girls, maybe some friends tagged in a picture. But no, any pictures of her with other girls in it, the girls were not tagged in, and there were no comments from any of the girls in the pictures. This was starting to scream catfish, so I blocked the account. Not long after, talking within 10 minutes, I started getting spammed with DMs from 3 random accounts. They all had profile pictures, but all of them had less than 50 followers. They all appeared to be fake, and they were DMing me threats about how I shouldn't have done that. I gave in and replied to one of them, and instantly, it replied back, "Unblock Miranda." I blocked that account as well, and went to unsend all my recent DMs to that Miranda account, specifically the one with my address in it. I counted myself lucky I didn't give the account my phone number or any other info. I also set my Instagram profile to private. After that ordeal, I ended up trying to get anyone else to come over and take advantage of having the house to myself, but eventually I gave up and went to bed. I have trouble sleeping 90% of the time, and this night was no exception. So after I'd say at least an hour and a half of trying to fall asleep, I heard noises from outside in the living room. Now this was in February, so it was freezing out and the heat was on full blast, so there were always ticking and clicking sounds from all the baseboard heaters. But a couple noises sounded a little different, like louder. I didn't go check though, and while each click and clack from around the house was making me look over into my dark room making sure no one was there, I eventually somehow fell asleep. But not for long. I woke up and it was still dark in the room. I knew something woke me up, like how sometimes you hear a sound in your sleep and it's a delayed reaction before you wake up a few seconds later. Well, that's what happened here. I sat up in my bed, the clicking of the heater still filling the room. I looked in the far corner of my room, and at first I didn't believe what I was seeing. I looked closer and could see it better. There was a person in the corner of the room, and I swear I could see their grinning face. I was so scared in that moment, I got up from my bed, unable to even scream. I ran all the way outside into the snow in my bare feet, and I rang the neighbor's bell a million times. While in there, I basically cried to them that someone was in the house, and I used their phone to call 911. When police searched the entire house, they didn't find anyone. The back door and side door were both locked, and so were most of the windows. The only possibility of someone getting in would have been through one of the backyard windows, which was left unlocked. The police officers comforted me in letting me know that it may have just been a hallucination, which I learned through research can happen in the moments after just waking up for some people. Sleeping in the house alone the rest of the night was the most anxious thing I'd ever done after that, but I really won't ever know for sure if what I saw was really just a hallucination, or if, God forbid, whoever was running that Miranda catfish account was in my house. A few months after this incident, that account was either deleted by the user or taken down by Instagram. It no longer exists.
Instagram is my favorite time waster app. I spend a good chunk of my free time browsing it. I've gotten my fair share of creepy DMs. I've learned to ignore them. So when I got a notification from Instagram that some random account requested to DM me, I didn't sweat it. I did, however, just open the DM because I always do out of curiosity. The DM was a link to another Instagram profile named Perfect Always with a Z. I pressed the link and it opened this page with a bunch of pictures of girls, like young girls, seemingly varying in ages from 13 to 20. As I continued to scroll through the account, I picked up on an unsettling fact, that all the pictures seemed to have been taken in secret. Like one girl was on a school bus, one was sitting on a park bench, one was taken from behind a bush of a girl walking on a sidewalk, one was taken of a group of girls at a college campus, Expecting to find perverted comments on the posts, all I found were positive comments like "keep up the good work" and "nice." There were also some comments with random numbers, like 500, and that's it. And every single account that commented appeared to be spam accounts, like no profile pictures and no followers. It was a weird and creepy account, so I reported it and sent a link of it to my friend Allie. Then I went about my business. I was at school when all this happened, so I couldn't give it too much attention to begin with. It wasn't until after school when I got home that Allie finally texted back saying, "OMFG, who did that? That's crazy." I replied, "I know, it's so creepy." She seemed more concerned and shocked than I was expecting her to be. She replied saying, "You need to report that to the police right away." I replied back, "Why me? It's not exactly my problem." She replied back with nothing but question marks mixed with exclamation points. So I said, "Why are you freaking out?" She said, "Why don't you care about someone posting pictures of you on their Instagram?" My heart sank. I immediately rushed to click the link again and view the profile. This time there were 2 new photos uploaded to the page. One of a girl in the passenger seat of an SUV, and one a picture of me walking home. It was taken from inside a car parked on the side of the road. I remembered seeing that car, and I remembered noticing someone sitting in it. This just seemed unreal. I called Allie at once, freaking out. I told her why I didn't understand at first, and explained how some random account DM'd me the link. Allie told me to report it to Instagram and the police. I told her I reported it to Instagram already, and told her to do the same. I stayed locked in my room talking to Allie for at least an hour, as I was home alone. The next time I refreshed that Instagram page, it said, "This page does not exist." First thought, okay, it blocked me, so I asked Allie to refresh it as well, and it said the same thing for her. We both used our Finsta accounts to confirm that it was removed, and it was. The account no longer appeared. I still don't know if it was taken down by Instagram or if the creator of the account deactivated it. I also have no idea what those numbers in the comments meant. Either way, it seemed like one big setup thing, and I'm scared to know any other details about what was going on with that Instagram page. This situation happened in my first year of high school. I was 15 years old and lived pretty far from school, which resulted in me taking public transportation to and from there. My Instagram was set to public back then, and I never really cared much about who followed me, which, in retrospect, being a young teen, I should have. My page was pretty standard. I was visible in most of my posts, posing by myself or with a couple of my friends for the most part. I also post a lot of my story, which for those of you who don't know, allows users to share photos and videos to their story for 24 hours. In those stories, I would sometimes include a shot of me waiting for the bus or at the subway with music playing in the background. I remember posting such one day, and randomly looking at my stories and seeing who viewed them. I had around 120 views, most of them from people I knew. One account in particular stuck out. The profile pic showed an unfamiliar middle-aged man. The selfie was taken at a weird close-up angle, like those cliché parent selfies. He had seen every one of my stories posted. I didn't really think that much of it, and continued about my day. Hours later, when I was nearing sleep at around 2 a.m., I got notifications that that same man had requested to DM me, followed me, and liked all my posts. I had about 12 posts, so it wasn't a crazy amount of notifications. I opened his DM and it just said, "Hey," with a smiley face. I definitely found this crazy weird, so I didn't respond and checked his profile. His username was odd. Sam with a bunch of numbers. He only had one post, the weird angled selfie with 2 likes. I finally got a decent look at his face. He was pale and bald with dark tinted sports glasses. He seemed to be wearing a ripped white t-shirt. He had 5 followers and was following around 400 people, which mostly consisted of teenage girls, young women, and a few celebrities. Realizing what an actual creeper this guy was, I blocked him, plain and simple. In the morning, I got off the subway stop that's next to my school and took a seat on the bench in the middle of the platform to adjust my backpack. Upon doing this, I felt someone watching me. The platform was packed with people, so I thought maybe it was just my anxiety. I rose up and turned to find the now familiar middle-aged creep staring at me. His eyes were a glossy blue color, sunken and droopy. He stood a good 20 feet from me, just gawking with an angered frown. I felt a strong urge to throw up and cry at the same time. My skin prickled and my whole body filled with fear. Everything I was feeling was multiplied by 1,000 as I realized he was slowly walking towards me. No one paid him any attention, no one batted an eye, and I remember breathing hard and heavily, wishing someone would pick up on what was happening. I turned and speed walked around and past people trying to lose him, though with each step I took back, he took 2 steps forward. He was getting a lot closer to me by the second. It was all happening so fast, and I honest to God didn't know whether to continue to run or attempt to draw attention to him. I ran into a woman with a seemingly friendly face on the stairs, and that's when I decided on the ladder. I told her that guy in white is following me. As I spoke, I heard my own voice quiver, and that's when I realized how afraid and panicked I actually was. She noticed the man I was referring to at the bottom of the steps, and right away she called him out. She told him to stop following me or she'd call the police. Her shouts made him freeze as others began to stop and take note of the situation. She stood protectively in front of me, waiting for his next move. I took the opportunity to snap a quick pic of his face that I would later use to report him. In my head, all I thought was, he's not going to do anything with people watching me. He can't be that stupid. And I was right. He turned around and got on the next subway train. The woman walked me to my school, and on the way, I couldn't help but wonder how that man could have possibly found me. And then I remembered. I posted a story of the subway stop I got off. That realization alone made my skin crawl and taught me a very important lesson to never reveal your specific location to your public social media. After the woman walked me to my school, I thanked her and actually gave her a hug. I don't know what I would have done if she hadn't stepped in. I wasn't brave enough to say anything to the man, so frozen in fear, but that woman was, and I'm forever grateful for her. And I hope that if anyone is ever in her position, that they will step in and use their voice to help. The internet and social media can be a very dangerous thing. This personal experience of mine is a prime example of what I mean. I've had an Instagram account for like 7 years now. I used to post on it a lot more when I was younger. These days I really don't post at all, and I only open the app like once a day just to browse my friends' posts or whatever. Well, recently I lost my phone. I figured it was time for a new one anyway though. I did try the whole find my iPhone thing, but it said my phone was like 30 miles away. It just wasn't worth it for that old phone. Moving on, one day not too long ago, I got a DM from a kid from high school that I hadn't spoken to in years. In fact, I didn't even follow him. I peeped what he DM'd me, and it was a heads up message. He was bringing it to my attention that someone was using my pictures on a fake Instagram account. He shared the profile in question with me, so I had a look and realized he was right. There was this entire account pretending to be me, just using a different name. There were pictures I'd never even posted on Instagram before on there, pictures exclusive to my old phone. My head was spinning. I actually felt sick over this. I immediately assumed whoever found my old phone somehow bypassed the password. The account had 50 followers and it was following around 150 people. The posts all got like 5 to 10 likes. Most had no comments, but some had basic comments like a flame emoji or whatever. This account was literally pretending to be me. It had a story posted, so I went to check that, and I felt even more sick to my stomach. It was a boomerang panning from my house to my car over and over, as if they were showing off both. A boomerang is basically just a looping 2-second video that goes back and forth from one point to another. This meant whoever was doing this knew where I lived, and had any other information I may have still had on that phone. The story was posted only a few hours ago. I immediately thought to go to find my iPhone settings and turn on lost mode. I regretted not doing that the second I lost that phone now. When I tracked my old phone one last time, I was in for another horrible surprise. It said the location of my old phone was right outside our house somewhere. There's a lot of space between houses in our gated community, so there was no mistaking that person was still out there on the property somewhere. I turned on lost mode on the old phone, then ran downstairs to get my roommate Corey's attention. It seemed he was already occupied though, by his husky barking at something in the backyard. Corey was standing by the door watching his dog. I explained in as few words as possible because I felt the situation was dire. We stepped out into the yard together to call his dog in. He was out in the grass barking rather viciously at someone or something out of sight. The dog was barely visible because it was so dark out. We went together to grab the dog by the collar, and as we got hold of him, We saw someone in the bushes run away into the patch of trees that separated our house from the next house. It was like a jump scare moment in a horror movie. That dark figure I saw run into the trees had to be the stalker pretending to be me on Instagram. I just knew it. We brought the dog inside and locked the door. You may ask, why didn't we let the dog chase down whoever it was? That's because Corey's dog is all bark, no bite. He wouldn't ever harm a fly. At some point in the middle of the night, the dog started barking again downstairs by the front door. This was very unusual behavior, so Corey and I both checked out the windows and then stepped outside. It was the most scared I had ever felt in my life, standing on the front porch, looking out into the dark night, knowing someone was out there probably watching us. We went back inside, and for the rest of the night, silence. I think whoever had my phone turned it off or smashed it after I put it in lost mode to avoid it being tracked any further. I say this because it would no longer update the location. I checked everywhere by the last known location, but it didn't turn up. After DMing that account that I knew who they were and was filing a report to the police, the account disappeared only a few minutes later. I don't think it was deactivated. I think it was completely deleted. My threat seemed to work. Like I said, this was recently though, and I'm still staying very aware of my surroundings.
If you're looking into creating a YouTube channel of your own, but have no idea where to even start as far as learning video editing, then Skillshare may be the answer to your problem. Skillshare is an online
There's something particularly chilling about unexpected and unexplained TV broadcasts, especially those from the pre-internet era. A time before 24/7 broadcasting, and a period many of us associate with our childhoods, with Saturday morning cartoons and carefree weekends in front of the tube. For a Selena Delgado or a Max Headroom to suddenly intrude that space and appear in our very living rooms, that would feel like a personal attack on the most fragile part of our psyche. The fact that both Selena and Max are being discussed today, decades after they aired, just goes to show how much a mysterious broadcast can stay lodged in our minds, even if we weren't there to witness them ourselves. Just like the Selena Delgado mystery, today's first entry revolves around a missing persons alert. And just like the Max Headroom interruption, it comes from the unofficial home of creepy and enigmatic broadcasting: Chicago. January 14th, 1989 was business as usual at Chicago's WMAQ, a local TV station owned by NBC. In the early hours, the channel ended their scheduled programming the same way they always did, by airing a selection of public service announcements, a sermon, and finally, the national anthem, played over the same old pre-recorded footage as always. As the camera zoomed in on the American flag, the few viewers still tuned in no doubt expected the station to cut to their usual sign-off screen. But that didn't happen. Instead, this did. With no pre-warning and no context, the station hard cut to a missing persons alert for a Joanna Lopez. This slide remained on screen for several hours until the morning. Most of the station's viewers were caught off guard for obvious reasons. The photo of the missing girl was extremely grainy, as if it were a photocopy of an actual poster. It's hard to make out any facial details at all, and those large glasses give her a deeply uncanny, almost alien-like appearance. There was no voiceover to explain who this Joanna Lopez was, where she had last been seen, or what may have happened to her. In fact, there was no sound whatsoever.
The following video is sponsored by Keeps. the sky, where the sun shines all day, every day.
I heard about 15
The
to
site's called
20 gunshots.
youtube.com, and that's YOU.
I don't give up. And I do not back down.
And now, our feature presentation.
Hi everyone, this is a YouTube video that I made as a community service.
Flight. For some of us, it's a luxury, a quick and easy way from point A to point B, while for others, it's an anxiety inducer, a mortal fear even. But for 53-year-old Zahari Ahmad Shah, flying was simply his life. His passion started at the age of just 20, when Zahari would begin studying and training to become a pilot, until eventually becoming a full-time captain years down the line. He went on to log over 18,000 hours of flight time, without receiving so much as a single blemish on his record. As a pilot, his skills and work ethic were impeccable, earning him great respect among his peers. While outside of work, he was really just a normal guy. He had a flourishing family with a wife and 3 children, as he spent most of his free time either with them, or fishing, cooking, and perusing social media, with one of his favorite sites being YouTube. Not only was Zahari an active user, but he would also post an occasional video or two of himself, of which very little ever stood out.
And this is how it looks like.
As at the time, his channel seemed destined for obscurity. However, it wouldn't turn out this way, as in the end, it would take just a single day for his channel to become one of YouTube's darkest.
Ladies and gentlemen, for your safety, please observe the presentation of safety procedures on the screen at the front.
April 27th, 2010, Zahari's channel is launched, at first being primarily used to listen to music, as well as watching the latest viral video that the site had to offer. And it wasn't until the start of 2013 that he would begin uploading videos of his own. And when I previously mentioned that very little stood out in these videos, that may have actually been an understatement, since they all came across as almost painfully normal. His first upload was the first of a 2-part instructional video on how to save money on your air conditioning, and in it we see his wife occasionally jump in to help Zahari as he shares his tips on reducing the cost of electricity bills.
Now you need to push the blue line of the air, so she's gonna do it for 1 second.
The 2 videos were certainly informative, but visually there isn't much to unpack here, with the exception of one detail. As behind Zahari was what appeared to be a massive flight simulator right within his home.
Fix the leakage or fix any problem that is in the system.
It was a device that Zahari had put together himself and used both for fun and to hone his skills. And considering his line of work and what we know about him, this wasn't all that surprising, as he not only took his job very seriously, but he also just genuinely loved to fly. From there, Zahari would go on to publish 5 other videos following this same formula. Low-quality tutorials like how to properly seal your windows,
That you can do, and it's very effective.
And how to clean your air conditioning unit.
Lift up the bottom pipe.
None of which ever really had a chance of making him rich or famous, but that was never the point. As for Zahari, this channel really only served as a way to help others, going out of his way to make useful videos for those who could really benefit from them, and he did so only out of the goodness of his heart, as he received nothing in return. And to those who knew Zahari at the time, this was exactly the kind of man he was, a good and honest person, always wanting to provide others with a helping hand.
Breaking news tonight.
But that was then. And today, Zahari is viewed much, much differently, with it all going back to one day, a day in which Zahari's life and the world itself would forever be changed.
I will now brief you on the safety procedures to be observed on this airplane.
March 8th, 2014. Captain Zahari clocks in for duty at the Kuala Lumpur International Airport, with his first flight being a roughly 6-hour trip to Beijing International Airport. In the cockpit alongside him would be 27-year-old Farik Abdul Hamid, a first officer partaking in his final training flight before facing examination to become an official captain. Together, the pair was well-versed and well-equipped, as Zahari himself had made this trip countless times before. And by 12:42 a.m., the massive Boeing 777, its 12 crew members, and 227 passengers would take to the sky en route to yet another routine trip to Beijing. Little did the passengers know at the time, but from the moment that flight left the ground, their fate was forever sealed, as they now had a front row seat to one of the most shocking aviation events in human history.
Breaking news tonight, a Malaysia Airlines flight with 239 people on board, including 4 Americans, has gone missing. At this hour, a desperate search is underway for MH Flight 370.
That day, Malaysia Flight 370 would lose radar signal not even an hour into its course, and essentially vanish into thin air, with its final destination still being unknown to this day. And right at the very center of this mysterious event was its captain, Zahari Shah. What exactly happened on that fateful flight is and will likely always remain a mystery, but in recent years there has been at least a vague outline of events constructed that seem to point to one disturbing conclusion. At approximately 1:19 a.m., Captain Zahari would make contact with air traffic controllers as his plane was leaving Malaysian airspace and heading into Vietnamese airspace.
Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. Good night, Malaysian 370.
Though from there, Zahari would never contact the team in Vietnam, and instead, the transponder within the plane that essentially acts as a tracking device for officials on the ground would be manually turned off just 2 minutes after Zahari's final message. With this, the plane had essentially become invisible to the world below, with the exception of a far less reliable tracker built within the plane that couldn't be manually shut down. The device works by sending out a ping with the plane's coordinates once every hour, which, when analyzed, showed investigators that rather than heading towards Beijing, the plane had instead done a complete 180 immediately following Zahari's final transmission, and was actually heading in the direction of Australia before the signal was lost for good somewhere over the Indian Ocean. This information would only grow more concerning, as in 2015, small pieces of the craft began washing ashore in various locations, some of which showing damage consistent with a plane that had struck water at high speeds. Taking all this into consideration, it does seem likely that the plane had ultimately crashed into the Indian Ocean, with the larger parts of the craft likely having sunk to the bottom around the location of that final ping.
With deep sadness that I must inform you, Flight MH370 ended in the southern Indian Ocean.
And with the depths in that area reaching over 3 miles deep, it's very likely that these parts may never be found. But though this seems like a logical conclusion, this theory fails to provide an explanation as to how the plane got so far off course, as no navigational or electrical failure could have ever accounted for the bizarre movement of the flight, which is where Captain Zahari comes into play. For starters, that transponder was turned off immediately after he had given that final message, which was then followed by the plane turning 180 degrees and heading in the complete opposite direction, ultimately to its demise. Both of these actions are extremely noteworthy, as they were not only undoubtedly deliberate, but they also could have only been done from inside the cockpit, a place in which only Zahari and Farik had access to, immediately making the 2 pilots the primary suspects, with Zahari quickly emerging as suspect number 1. According to those close to Zahari, his mental health had seemingly been on the decline for months, and potentially even years leading up to the event. And according to his own daughter, her father had become quote-unquote unrecognizable, with others adding that he was in no mental shape to be flying. Along with this, Zahari had seemingly been having struggles with his marriage, as he had been caught on numerous occasions flirting with other women over social media, causing a rift that you would never sense by watching his videos.
And Nur Hayati here, my helper.
And on the subject of these videos, one of the most damning pieces of evidence used against Zahari had actually made an appearance in his very first upload. Upon investigators searching Zahari's home for clues, they would analyze the flight simulator seen in the background of this video, where they discovered a disturbing clue. Within the data of the flight simulator, it was found that Zahari had charted a course and practiced flying a route that matched nearly identically to the one Flight 370 was said to have taken that fateful day. And given just how obscure that route was, investigators believed that this couldn't have been a coincidence. As to make matters even stranger, Zahari had actually tried to scrub the data from the device just 1 month before that fateful flight.
Some data has been deleted from the simulator, and forensic work to retrieve this data is ongoing.
Taking all of this into consideration, the narrative was quickly formed that Captain Zahari had premeditated this entire disaster as some sort of murder-suicide mission, with this now becoming the most widely believed and currently most likely theory to explain the mystery of Flight 370. Though it is important to remember that this is just that, a theory, and it is in no way a concrete conclusion. However, if this were to be true, that would make Zahari Ahmad Shah the most prolific killer in YouTube's history, by a huge margin, as he would have been responsible for the deaths of over 238 people, with his channel potentially featuring the very device that this whole event was plotted on.
Thank you for your attention. Do enjoy our golden service.
Do you want to hear something truly horrifying? 2 out of 3 men will experience some form of hair loss by the age of just 35. But thankfully, today's sponsor Keeps is here to help. Keeps is a clinically proven and research-backed treatment that not only stops hair loss, but also improves hair growth. And the best part is you don't even need to leave your home to receive it, as all of Keeps subscription plans come doctor recommended and delivered straight to your door, while being roughly half the cost of treatments from the pharmacy. Keeps is backed by a network of expert medical advisors, prescribers, and care specialists who offer 24/7 care and support to assure that your hair goals become a reality. I personally know a few people who have used Keeps, and all of them swear by it, as the results have honestly been pretty amazing. Hair loss stops with Keeps, and to get 50% off your first order, head over to keeps.com/Crowley or click the link in the description. That's keeps.com/Crowley.
All about America. America is a pretty amazing place.
October 2nd, 2010. A bizarre 7-minute video titled, "America, Your Last Memory in a Terrorist Country," is posted to YouTube depicting a masked man in a robe setting fire to the American flag. The video is accompanied by a rambling description stating, "I want you to imagine a comet or meteoroid coming through the atmosphere. On the other hand, welcome yourself to the desert. Maybe your ability to protest is from the brainwashing of the current government structure." This incoherent writing and strange video would be the only content featured on a channel called Star Hitchnaz, but it would be far from the only upload that its creator would make to the platform in general. The man's real name is Jared Lautner, and over the course of 2010, he would use YouTube as a way of critiquing society in the United States, with most, if not all of his videos coming across as extremely disjointed and showing clear indications that Jared himself was completely delusional. However, he wasn't always this way. as growing up, he lived a fairly normal life in Tucson, Arizona, becoming a decent student and even a talented musician. And it wasn't until high school that things would really take a turn for the worst, when his then girlfriend, a young lady named Kelsey Hawkins, would unexpectedly end their relationship. Something that Jared would never recover from, as immediately following this, he would fall into a deep depression before eventually turning to drugs and alcohol to cope. With this, his once kind and caring personality would become bitter and defiant as he began lashing out against his teachers and bosses, something that first led to Jared losing his job at Quiznos and his position at a local animal shelter, with this trend continuing on into 2006, when Jared would leave high school and never return, instead becoming a social recluse within his parents' home. There, Jared's only interaction with the outside world would come in the form of conspiracy forums and blogs, as Jared not only became more and more detached from the world around him, but he also became more and more angry at it as well, with a specific hatred developing for the government, an idea that was only amplified on the date of August 25th, 2007.
And today, a chance to bring those kinds of concerns straight to Representative Gabrielle Giffords as she brought Congress to the corner of Grant and Craycroft.
That day, Jared would attend an event in the Tucson area held by the then Arizona Senator Gabrielle Giffords, where local citizens could ask questions or raise concerns directly to the senator herself. And on that day, Jared would be given a chance to speak briefly with her, which he'd take advantage of by asking the question, "What is government if words have no meaning?" It's unknown exactly how Senator Giffords responded to this, but according to Jared, he felt as though she had brushed aside his question and essentially ignored it altogether by moving right on to the next person, clearly not taking Jared seriously, which was said to have infuriated him, as his hatred for the government that had been brewing for some time had become even more justified in his mind, and things were about to get much worse. As after the event, Jared would receive a letter from Senator Giffords' team thanking him for attending the function, only to have his last name misspelled on the document. For Jared, the whole ordeal with this senator was too much for him to bear, as he believed that the government was run by incompetent and illiterate people who were nowhere near his intelligence level, with the misspelled name becoming a fixation of his, as he slowly began to believe that he was the only literate person left throughout the world, with this going on to inspire the content he'd create here on YouTube. The video created by Jared showing him burning an American flag features a pretty self-explanatory message on how he felt about America as a whole, but this clip was far from his most scathing upload, with that having come just a few weeks prior.
I'm in a terrible place. This is my genocide school.
At the time, Jared had been attending Pima Community College, a school featuring a program designed to help high school dropouts get their lives back on track and eventually actually obtain a college degree, which in theory sounded like a great thing for Jared, though in reality, its results only proved to sink him further. During his time at Pima, police would be called to his classes on 5 separate occasions when Jared would protest, argue with, and defy his teachers, as he had major problems with any and all authority figures in his life. After all, he believed that he was by far the most intelligent person on the planet, and feeling wronged and frustrated with his schooling, his feelings would all spill out in one video posted to a now deleted channel, showing Jared behind the camera touring his campus.
This is Pima Community College. The students are so illiterate that it affects their daily lives. They're controlling the grammar. They control the grammar. How's it going? Thanks for the B. I'm pissed off. What's that? I lost my freedom of speech to that guy. All the teachers that you have are being paid illegally and have a legal authority over the Constitution of the United States under the First Amendment.
It's not hard to understand the concern behind this video, as Jared was clearly mentally ill at the time.
If the student is unable to locate the external universe, and the student is unable to locate the internal universe. Where is all my subjects? I could say something sound right now, but I don't feel like it.
And filled with so much obvious anger that could be heard seeping out of his voice. And given that no one really knew what he was capable of doing, the video would quickly be sent to school administrators, who immediately perceived it to be a threat. This led to Jared's instant removal from the school, with the option being given for him to return again if he were to receive psychiatric help. This, however, never happened, and instead, Jared would only isolate himself even further, with his internal rage reaching an all-time high, and his delusions as well, all of which would be documented on his final channel called Class It Up 10. The videos here are some of the most bizarre that you'll ever see, as they feature only text writings from Jared, who discusses his problems with society, as well as his ways to fix it. In his first upload, he tells his audience that he was creating a new currency, a new letter to be added to the alphabet, and even a new number, which he believed would reject the government's authority and give him some control of the currency, the numbers, and the language of society. And his postings wouldn't stop there. He wrote about how he believed he could control every belief and every religion by being a quote-unquote mind controller, of which he offered no other context for. By this point, his words were almost impossible to fully understand, leading to his final video in which he stated, "My ambition is for informing illiterate dreamers about a new currency. In a few days, you'll know I'm concise dreaming. Thank you." These were the final words written to the Class It Up 10 YouTube channel, and the final trace of Jared left behind on YouTube, as in his mind, he was now in control of society, and all that was left to do was show the world.
In a democracy, people have the power, and in America, that means you.
In the early morning hours of January 8th, 2011, Jared checked into a motel room where he would post a photo to his MySpace page of a gun on top of a US textbook, along with a series of other lewd photographs of him in women's underwear, featuring the message, "Dear friends, please don't be mad at me. The literacy rate is below 5%. I haven't talked to one person who is literate." After this, Jared would go on to attend another political event happening within the parking lot of a nearby Safeway store, with this event being that same one that he had went to years before, with it being hosted by none other than Senator Gabby Giffords, the villain in his story, and soon to be the main target of his rage. It happened in just 15 seconds. As the senator was meeting citizens one by one, Jared would promptly cut the line, pull out his pistol, and open fire at point-blank range. His first shot would strike Gabby Giffords directly in the forehead, before he turned the gun on the crowd of innocent bystanders and fired at random. In total, 13 people would be struck before Jared was tackled to the ground and restrained, and of those victims, tragically, 6 would lose their lives, quite literally in the matter of a few seconds, a short yet devastating rampage. But shockingly, Gabby Giffords would not be one of these 6 victims to lose their lives, as despite being shot directly through the head, she would eventually go on to survive the ordeal and has since gone on to make an incredible recovery. Jared's multiple channels remain live and now sit dormant, in a state that will likely never be changed, as he is destined to live out the remainder of his life in prison, with those final videos serving as a brief glimpse into the mind of one of the most disturbed killers in the United States' recent history. A troubled man who, much like our next YouTuber, had their final thoughts and final delusions captured right here on YouTube. Only in the case of the Indigo Mystic, her disturbing conclusion would play out right on her channel for the whole world to see.
had always been the perfect mother, but you'll have a hard time keeping this mother down.
Hello, everybody. It's the Indigo Mystic. Toodaloo.
Her name is Jessica Worsham, a 43-year-old mother of two living in Houston, Georgia. From an early age, Jessica viewed herself as different from most others in the world, believing that she possessed psychic abilities that not many could comprehend, which was ultimately the inspiration behind her YouTube channel, The Indigo Mystic, a page that aimed to open a dialogue with others like her. And from its inception back in April of 2013, her content was apparently very lighthearted, and for the most part, almost entirely positive. A trend that has long since ended. For years, Jessica had been living as an unemployed single mother with her two children, and given her lack of income, she struggled to find permanent residency for her family. Or at least that was until the year 2019, when family friends would allow them to live rent-free in a home they were selling. They allowed Jessica and the kids to stay in the vacant home until someone would buy the property, which ultimately would wind up taking nearly 3 whole years, meaning that all that time, Jessica and her children were able to live there without paying a single dime. The situation really should have been a dream come true for Jessica. Yet, when those 3 years were up, her reaction was far from grateful, as she immediately fought the decision to remove her from the home and refused to leave the premises, eventually going so far as to take these generous friends all the way to court, where unsurprisingly she would lose the case and subsequently be forced to leave the home. This situation was said to be the ultimate tipping point for Jessica's mental health, as she believed that this was all an elaborate plot against her to ruin her life, blaming the courts and the judge specifically for making her homeless.
You used to be a good person, didn't you, Benji? You did. You used to actually have the desire for justice. God knows about you. That's why you're scared. And you know who I am, don't you? All your little friends and buddies know exactly who I am and what I'm about. Well, since this is just for Benjamin Green, kiss my ass.
Following this, the Indigo Mystic channel would no longer be a hub for positivity or spirituality, as Jessica would instead delete all of the channel's content, and in turn, she began obsessively uploading about the people who she believed had wronged her.
So, you want to attack me, huh? That's fine. Just get ready. And when I said karma was coming for you, I meant it.
And from that moment on, Jessica's videos would only grow more and more scathing, as little did she know, but there was yet another court battle looming in the distance. Following the initial court's ruling, Jessica and her children would begin couch surfing from place to place, living in a constant state of packing and moving, as due to the stress of the situation and her declining mental health, Jessica would begin picking fights and blowing up on those who were kind enough to take them in for free, something that would be documented on numerous occasions across the Indigo Mystic channel.
You don't want none of me, I promise. Oh yeah, I do. Fantastic! And he's coming over. That's what woman? What am I doing? Get the fuck out of my face! She hit me first. Stop it. Get the fuck out of here! I'm just trying to get scared.
But of these combative instances, what stood out the most was just how involved the children were, as at that time she had trained them to record all of her arguments so that she can then upload them to YouTube and act as if she were the victim. But in reality, it's not hard to see that the real victims were the children themselves.
You go first. I'm scared. I don't know what's gonna happen next. Where are we gonna go?
I mean, the pain in their voice and the fear they clearly had, knowing that they were being kicked out of yet another home, is heartbreaking, with this truly being how these kids lived on a daily basis, and others were starting to take notice. Seeing how the children were being treated and what they were living through, their biological father, a man named Sean, would attempt to gain custody to provide the children with a stable living environment, as he, along with many others, believed that Jessica wasn't fit to be caring for children at the time. This wasn't only due to the instability of her housing and her seemingly aggressive behavior, but Jessica herself had clearly become mentally unwell at best, and at worst, she had become completely delusional, as she would begin posting videos claiming that she was being gang stalked.
All the stalking, all the gang stalking by my family and by these certain police factions needs to stop. I'm aware of you, honey. Don't you see me packing every time I go outside? And the more you come for me, the worse it's gonna be for you.
Along with this, she would also claim to have put hexes on the judges.
You're in regret, right? Scared? Can't sleep at night? Up all night? Maybe having ulcers? Yeah. That's right. If you only knew who I was. Hope those dreams are making you feel good. You're gonna regret ever getting yourself involved.
And her delusions would only get more and more bizarre, as at one point she even called out the judges for attempting to telepathically communicate with her, even accusing them of performing child sacrifices behind closed doors.
I know you watching me, and I know you're scared, and you should be. Dingledorf, he's too scared. He's too scared to even try to communicate with me telepathically, but you're scared, aren't you, Benji? What about the children? And you know what I mean. Those that you've sacrificed for your glory. Because it's really hilarious, and it's going to be even more hilarious when my plan falls into place.
By this point, Jessica was completely detached from reality, and it seemed clear that she was neglecting the needs of her children, which would all come to a head on September 14th, 2021. That day, Jessica had been summoned into court for a hearing to determine the custody of her 2 children, something that she would discuss briefly in a video posted just hours before her arrival.
I'm actually going to court today against some people that are trying to take my children from me. The same people that took my home from me. the Jackson County court system. I really do feel more sorry for them and what's going to happen to them than me and my children, because my children aren't going anywhere. Anyway, if you don't see a video pop up in the next couple days, I probably got arrested, because I'm not going to back down.
And upon arriving at court that day, Jessica would have her children film yet another one of her arguments, as she would refuse to enter the courtroom.
My name is the Indigo Mystic. Oh, I'm sorry, Jessica Worsham. You guys have already taken our home from us, and you denied us help when we were being attacked several times. They refused to go inside. So if you could just relay that information for me, I would greatly appreciate it. We stand in solidarity as sovereign individuals, and we're not going to tolerate this injustice. I don't know where the justice in this world went in this country, but it is not here, fellas and ladies. Not here. I'm not going to have my children taken from me.
The situation ultimately only proved to the judge just how bad things were in Jessica's mind, as the hearing would ultimately take place without her present, thus resulting in Jessica losing custody of her children, though only temporarily, as it was explained that once Jessica had found permanent residency and got help for her mental health issues, then she would be allowed to have her children back, and that this was only being done to keep the children safe. Though Jessica didn't see it this way, and under no circumstances would she be willing to give up her children, as she instead decided to take matters into her own hands. And immediately following the court's decision, Jessica Worsham and her 2 children would disappear. Well, not totally. Jessica did defy the court's decision, as she would take her children and go on the run, refusing to give them up. But even though most would assume that she would lay low for a while to avoid detection, in reality, Jessica would do just about the exact opposite, as she began posting more and more videos to her channel, this time outright threatening the judges whom she blamed this whole situation on, and daring them to take her children away from her.
They're mine. Mine, 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 M-I-N-E, mine. And I'll do anything, including lay my life down for them. And if you come after me, I'm just telling you right now, it ain't gonna go down pretty. No kinds of pretty is gonna come out of anything. And that's not a threat, that's a promise.
And her hatred wasn't just amplified towards the court officials, as she would also launch a whole new tirade against Sean, the father of her children.
You'll never have our love again. You'll never, ever see them again. They hate you.
with Jessica sinking to lower and lower depths to get back at him, with one of the most disturbing examples being when she had her children call him and tell them just how much they hated him and never wanted to see him again.
Isabella, do you want to be with Sean?
No.
Do you love him?
No.
Well, how do you feel about him?
I'm disgusted.
Hi, Sean. My daughter's trying to talk. How do you feel about him?
I think you're disgusting, and that's my opinion. That's my opinion and not hers. So, I mean, seriously though, we're disgusted. We hate you.
This is what you've done to your family.
We really hate you. So why don't you just shut the hell up?
The whole time her children are talking, Jessica continues egging them on to say worse and worse things. And though obviously I can't speak on their relationship with their father, this is still an incredibly toxic and traumatic thing to have your children do. And things were just getting started on the Indigo Mystic channel, as she had started to mention the fact that she had owned a gun, in which she nicknamed Betty.
I was in there buying some ammo, some critical defense bullets for Betty. You know, because we gotta treat her right, you know.
Which would eventually lead to this clip.
Just for any of y'all that might want to get wild, you know. This is Betty. Alright? Get a good look. Any of y'all that think y'all might want to come at me, I got something waiting for you.
Things were clearly escalating, and were undoubtedly soon to reach their breaking points, which leads us to November 3rd, 2021, when two of the most chaotic, bizarre, and disturbing videos I have ever seen were posted to the Indigo Mystic channel.
Hold your phone on their faces. I am. On their faces.
You need to get out of this house. You need to get out of this house. You want me to call the cops and get you out of this house?
At this time, Jessica had yet again been living with another family, and that night, two members of that family had gotten into a verbal and physical dispute, leading to an older gentleman being pushed on the ground. But as the family was fighting, Jessica decided to interject, only escalating the situation even more, as she began screaming at the family before they all lost their patience and demanded she leave the house, with the younger man going as far as to call the police. And in a panic, the children ran upstairs in fear that they had yet again lost another home. Meanwhile, Jessica had remained downstairs as she continued to argue with the family as they waited for the cops to arrive. And when they did, Jessica would be standing at the door to greet them, with Betty in her hand. Noticing the commotion, the children would do as they were trained and grab the camera. The children record just out of view as Jessica suddenly begins firing, leading to an all-out shootout with over a dozen shots ringing out, each of which being painfully captured as her children record helplessly, with the remainder of the video showing their reaction, which is just too upsetting for me to show. When it was all said and done, Jessica had fatally wounded 49-year-old Deputy Lena Marshall, a mother of three who tragically passed on the 18th anniversary of the death of her own son, while on the other side, Jessica Worsham laid dead in the doorway. Since the fatal incident, the Indigo Mystic channel still remains live, though as a shell of itself, as all of its uploads have now been wiped from the site, almost as if nothing ever happened. When in reality, this channel had perhaps one of the most disturbing life cycles ever seen on YouTube, with its final video being one of the darkest to ever be uploaded, as right after the shooting, and before they even knew the fate of their mother, the children would post the video with the misspelled title reading, "My mom is dead, I think," before days later, the whole channel would be wiped. I want to give a huge shout out to my gold tier patrons and my god tier patrons: Anarcho Queer 1994, Bazoo 42, Biznacker, Bray, Karen S, Sia Nash, Daniel Binge, Donovan Aaron, Emmanuel Cadena, Avert J2, Game Gamer, Jake, J Money, Catherine Ross, Lacey, Larry Mattingly, Mark PH, My Crafty Ways, Nathan Backus, Phoenix Morgan, Quinn Kiwi, Sam Lutfi, Scar77, Skelly, Max Barnett, Sub to Micro O, Trucky Doggo, Unblended Korchnoi, and Zinsu Sensei. January 3rd, 2021. Installment number 3 of YouTube's Darkest Channels is released.
I legit am scared.
The episode showcased multiple disturbing accounts, with one in particular being
pictures of last night ended up online. I'm screwed. Oh well. It's a blacked out blur, but I'm pretty sure it proved. Yeah, we did some table talk, and we took too many shots. Think we kissed the night before last Friday night. Yeah, we fixed the credit cards, then we kicked out of the bar, so we hit the boulevard last Friday night. We went streaking in the park, skinny dipping in the dark, then having a nice retroire last Friday night. Yeah, I think we broke the law. Always say we're gonna stop. Here's Friday night. Do it
La 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 la